You're listening to the Partisan Comms Podcast.
There is a signal broadcast every second of every day through our television sets.
Welcome to episode 13. I'm Terrence. Today we explore some of the most popular and controversial conspiracy theories that were actually proven true. The mysteries behind these events revealed the dark secrets and hidden agendas of powerful individuals and groups. Conspiracy theories often evoke images of wild speculation and paranoia. However, history has shown that some theories, once dismissed as mere fantasies, were eventually validated by evidence. While many conspiracy theories are often initially dismissed as wild or irrational speculations, lacking credible evidence or logic, sometimes these theories turn out to be based on facts that were deliberately concealed, distorted, or denied by authorities. These facts are often revealed by whistleblowers, journalists, researchers, or official investigations, exposing lies and crimes that were committed in the name of national security, political interest, or personal gain. Operation Mockingbird was a covert operation by the CIA to influence and manipulate the media by planting stories, spreading propaganda, and recruiting journalists as agents. The operation was launched in the early 1950s at the height of the Cold War to counter the Soviet influence and to promote the United States' interests around the world. The CIA used various methods to control the media, such as funding, bribing, blackmailing, or threatening journalists, editors, and publishers, as well as creating front organizations, fake news outlets, and wire services. The CIA also infiltrated and influenced major media outlets such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time, Newsweek, CBS, NBC, and ABC. The operation was exposed in the 1970s by a congressional investigation into the CIA's activities.
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. Now we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole News and Public Affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
We have quite a lot of detailed information, and we will evaluate it, and we will include any evidence of wrongdoing or any evidence of impropriety in our final report and make recommendations.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the National News Services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
Senator, do you think that you named the news organizations in your final report?
That remains to be decided.
I think it was entirely in order for our correspondents at that time to make use of CIA agent chiefs of station and other members of the executive staff of CIA as sources of information which were useful in their assessments of world conditions.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
In the early years of the Cold War, efforts were made by the United States government to use mass media to influence public opinion internationally. After the United States Watergate Committee in 1973 uncovered domestic surveillance abuses, the New York Times in 1974 published an article by Seymour Hersh claiming that the CIA had violated its charter by spying on anti-war activists. Former CIA officials and some lawmakers called for a congressional inquiry that became known as the Church Committee. Operation Mockingbird is believed to have been spearheaded by Frank Wisner, who was the head of the Office of Policy Coordination, which was a covert operations wing of the CIA. Although the primary objective of the operation was to recruit journalists and media outlets to disseminate propaganda that aligned with U.S. interests during the Cold War, a broader strategy was to counter Soviet influence and promote American values globally. The methods employed in Operation Mockingbird were varied and extensive. The CIA recruited journalists from major news organizations to act as operatives and spread disinformation. These journalists were often unaware of the full extent of their involvement, believing they were simply gathering intelligence or promoting patriotic narratives. The operation also involved funding and controlling various media outlets and front organizations. By doing so, the CIA could ensure that the information reaching the public was favorable to U.S. interests. This manipulation extended to both domestic and international media, with the agency using its influence to shape public opinion on a global scale. The first significant exposure came during the Watergate scandal, which led to increased scrutiny of government activities. In 1975, the Church Committee, chaired by Senator Frank Church, conducted investigations into alleged intelligence abuses by the CIA and other agencies. The committee's findings revealed extensive CIA involvement in media manipulation, confirming long-held suspicions about the agency's influence over the press. Further revelations came in 1977, when journalist Carl Bernstein published an article in Rolling Stone detailing the CIA's relationship with journalists and media organizations. Bernstein's report suggested that over 400 journalists had secretly carried out assignments for the CIA, highlighting the extensive reach of Operation Mockingbird. The exposure of Operation Mockingbird raised serious ethical questions about the role of journalism and the potential for government overreach in manipulating public opinion. The revelations led to calls for greater transparency and accountability in both the media and intelligence communities. In response to the scandal, the CIA reportedly scaled back its direct involvement with journalists. However, the legacy of Operation Mockingbird continues to influence discussions about media ethics and the relationship between the press and government agencies. Its exposure highlighted the potential for abuse in the relationship between the government and the media, underscoring the need for vigilance and ethical standards in journalism. As we navigate an increasingly complex media landscape, the lessons of Operation Mockingbird remind us of the importance of transparency, accountability, and it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of maintaining a free and independent press. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment was an unethical medical experiment conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service on hundreds of African American men in Tuskegee, Alabama, from 1932 to 1972. It involved studying the effects of untreated syphilis, which is a sexually transmitted disease, on the human body. The men who participated in the experiment were not informed of the true nature and purpose of the study. nor were they given proper treatment or consent. They were deceived and exploited by researchers who withheld penicillin, the cure for syphilis, and observed them as they suffered and died from the disease and its complications. The experiment was exposed in 1972 by a whistleblower who leaked the information to the press. The study involved 600 men, 399 of whom had syphilis and were misled into believing they were receiving free health care. In reality, they were being observed to study the progression of the untreated disease. Even after penicillin became the standard treatment for syphilis in 1947, the researchers withheld it from the participants. And after the nature of the study was exposed in 1972, it led to public outrage as well as significant changes in U.S. law regarding medical ethics. The study began at a time when there was no known cure for syphilis. The participants, primarily poor sharecroppers, were recruited with the promise of free medical care, meals, and burial insurance. However, they were misled into believing they were being treated for bad blood, which was a term used locally to describe various ailments. One of the most egregious aspects of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment was the deliberate withholding of effective treatment. Despite the fact that penicillin had become the standard treatment for syphilis by 1947, the researchers chose not to administer it to the participants. Instead, they continued to monitor the progression of the disease, which led to severe health complications, including blindness, mental impairment, and death. The researchers also actively prevented the participants from accessing treatment elsewhere, ensuring the study could continue. In 1972, the nature of the study was exposed when Peter Buxton, a venereal disease investigator, leaked the story to the press. The resulting public outrage led to the study's termination and a series of congressional hearings. In 1973, a class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of the participants and their families, resulting in a $10 million settlement. Additionally, the U.S. government established the Tuskegee Health Benefit Program to provide medical and health benefits to the surviving participants and their families. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment had a profound impact on medical ethics and public trust in the healthcare system, and it highlighted the need for informed consent in the ethical treatment of research subjects. In response to the scandal, the National Research Act was passed in 1974, leading to the establishment of institutional review boards to oversee research involving human subjects. And in 1997, President Bill Clinton formally apologized on behalf of the U.S. government, acknowledging the acts committed during the study.
Loved ones remember their relatives who were subject to a cruel medical experiment at the hands of the United States government.
They were never told that they had the disease.
For 40 years, starting in 1932, medical workers withheld treatment for hundreds of unsuspecting black men infected with syphilis. The purpose? So doctors could track the ravages of the horrid illness and dissect their bodies afterward in what became known as the Tuskegee study.
And for the sake of science, they sacrificed some human beings. And it raised the question, did they really believe these men were human beings? And so we really wonder about their intention as well as their behavior.
What the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry.
But even with an apology and a $9 million settlement, relatives of the men still struggle with the stigma of being linked to the experiment.
Project MKUltra was a CIA program that began in the early 1950s. It aimed to develop mind control techniques through the use of drugs, particularly LSD, as well as through other methods. Both U.S. and Canadian citizens were subjected to these experiments, which also included psychological torture in addition to drugging, and in some cases, these experiments were conducted without consent. The existence of MKUltra was revealed in 1975 during a congressional investigation confirming long-held suspicions about government mind control experiments. It was one of the most controversial and ethically questionable programs in U.S. history and was officially sanctioned in 1953 by then CIA Director Allen Dulles. The program was a response to fears that Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean agents were using mind control techniques on U.S. prisoners of war during the Korean War. The CIA sought to develop similar capabilities to use in interrogations and covert operations. The project was overseen by the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence and involved numerous institutions, including universities, hospitals, and prisons. The methods employed in MKUltra were diverse and often brutal. The CIA conducted experiments on both willing and unwitting subjects, using a variety of techniques to manipulate mental states and alter brain functions. The most infamous aspect of MKUltra was the use of psychoactive drugs, particularly LSD. Subjects were often dosed without their knowledge, leading to severe psychological distress, and in some cases, long-term mental health issues. Researchers explored the potential of hypnosis to induce amnesia, enhance memory, and create suggestible states in subjects. Subjects were exposed to prolonged periods of sensory deprivation and isolation to study the effects on the human psyche. Additionally, high doses of electroshock were used to erase memories and alter behavior.
At Stanford University near San Francisco, Dr. Harvey Weinstein is an associate professor of psychiatry, and he also counsels students.
Karen, why don't you tell me some more about the anxiety that you've been feeling?
I feel every time that I sit down at the desk.
Dr. Weinstein is a Montrealer who attended medical school at McGill University. But he refused to do his postgraduate work in psychiatry at McGill's Allen Memorial Institute because there his father had been used as a human guinea pig. He says he became a psychiatrist to unravel the horror of what happened to his dad, Louis Weinstein.
My father was a 49-year-old Montreal businessman who was successful and dynamic, and whose life was destroyed by a series of treatments. He was someone who became anxious for a relatively short period of time, who went to get some help, and whose life was totally shattered by the experience.
His father was one of the more than 50 patients treated here at the Allen Memorial Institute under a secret program designed to develop brainwashing techniques. The Allen has an international reputation as a renowned psychiatric institution. But in the late 50s, the patients knew nothing of a cascade of mind control experiments underway, including sensory deprivation and worse.
He went in one winter evening and was put to sleep for approximately 2 months. He was given shock treatments of various kinds, gradually building intensity to an intensity and a frequency that was not certainly the routine or standard of the time.
Electroshock is a standard but controversial treatment for extreme depression. However, at the Allen, the shocks were administered not 2 or 3 times a week, but 3 or 4 times a day for weeks on end. Patients were reduced to vegetables. It was called depatterning. And on top of that, the patients were given dangerous experimental drugs.
He was given a whole slew of drugs, including amphetamines, likely PCP, insulin comas, barbiturates of all kinds, LSD. He was then forced to listen to recorded messages.
It was called psychic driving. Once the patients were drugged and shocked to break down their minds, they were bombarded with taped messages for up to 16 hours a day. This is how one patient remembers it.
Responsibility, Jeanine. Why, Jeanine? Why? Why are you running? Why are you running away from your responsibility? Why are you responsibility? Why?
At the end of the time, my father was someone who was unrecognizable to me or to anyone else in the family or his friends. He was someone who could not function in this world, whose perspective didn't extend beyond the next 5 minutes, who had no recollection of the past, and almost no recognition of the present.
The CIA was behind it. Documents pried loose in 1979 showed that through a front organization, the Central Intelligence Agency funded what was called the MK Ultra Project. In Montreal, it was run by Dr. Ewan Cameron.
These are the days, and ours are the occasions.
Cameron had a worldwide reputation as chairman of McGill's Department of Psychiatry and president of both the American and World Psychiatric Associations.
And it is his mind, no less, which may destroy mankind.
Attracted by Cameron's reputation, Dr. Mary Morrow went to study psychiatry under him. Instead, Cameron persuaded her to become a patient at the Allen. He drugged her, shocked her massively, erased 10 years of her memory, and even today, she has difficulty remembering some names and faces.
He decided to ignore all principles, all medical ethics and medical principles. He used one of his own colleagues, me. How low can he get?
Well, I suppose it could be said to have originated.
It wasn't as though Cameron didn't know what he was doing.
The Allen Memorial Institute itself were founded.
Dr. Cameron was present at the Nuremberg trials. So I find that for someone who in 1945, 1946 was involved in evaluating and considering what the Nazis had done to helpless people in concentration camps, was 5 or 6 years later invading people's brains.
The ethical violations of MKUltra were numerous. Informed consent was rarely obtained, and many subjects were unaware they were part of an experiment. The program's activities were kept secret from the public and even from many within the government. The true extent of MKUltra's operations began to come to light in 1975 during investigations by the Church Committee mentioned earlier, as well as the Rockefeller Commission. The Church Committee, formerly referred to as the United States Senate Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with Respect to Intelligence Activities, was a U.S. Senate Select Committee in 1975 that investigated alleged abuses by the Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Internal Revenue Service.
Well, it's a bill that would set up a permanent oversight committee, bipartisan committee, with a rotating membership so that it would not be preempted by the agencies that it is to oversee, with sufficient authority both to keep the secrets that are legitimate and to investigate and expose wrongdoing when it occurs. We want to be sure that this country stays free, and that means that any spy agency continues to be outward looking, to spy on foreigners, but not to be spying on Americans or not to be trampling upon the laws and constitutional rights of American citizens. That would be its purpose, and in the long run it would contribute to public confidence in the CIA and make for an efficient intelligence agency operating within the law.
Newly released documents revealed details about MKUltra, a 1950s program using LSD and hypnosis to study behavior control. Pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly reportedly supplied large amounts of LSD for that project. Some tests were done on unsuspecting Americans, including prison inmates. National Security Archive, marking 50 years since the program's exposure, compared the research to Nazi experiments and criticized the lack of accountability.
The committee's efforts led to the establishment of the Permanent U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and the investigations revealed that the CIA had destroyed most of the records related to MKUltra in 1973 on the orders of then CIA Director Richard Helms. For years, conspiracy theorists have claimed that the government was spying on its citizens using various means, but those claims often would lack definitive proof. However, that all changed due to the actions of former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden. In June of 2013, Snowden became a household name when he leaked a trove of classified documents revealing the extent of global surveillance programs conducted by the NSA and its allies. These revelations sparked a worldwide debate about privacy, government overreach, and the balance between national security and civil liberties. Edward Snowden was born on June 21, 1983, in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Initially, he worked for the Central Intelligence Agency and later became a contractor for the NSA. His decision to leak classified information was driven by his growing concern over the NSA's surveillance practices, which he believed were overly intrusive and violated the privacy rights of individuals around the world. In interviews following the leak of classified material, he explained his actions were due to a feeling it was his moral duty to inform the public about these activities. In an interview with The Guardian, he stated that he wanted to, quote, inform the public as to that which is done in their name and that which is done against them. The documents Snowden leaked exposed several key surveillance programs. One of the most controversial was PRISM, which allowed the NSA to collect internet communications from major tech companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple. Another significant revelation was the collection of metadata from millions of phone calls, which included information about the time, duration, and participants of the calls, though not the content itself. These programs were justified by the NSA as necessary tools in the fight against terrorism, but they also raised serious concerns about the erosion of privacy and the potential for abuse. The impact of Snowden's actions were immediate and far-reaching. Governments, tech companies, and civil liberties organizations around the world reacted strongly. Some praised Snowden as a whistleblower and a hero who exposed government overreach and sparked a necessary debate about privacy and surveillance. However, others condemned him as a traitor who compromised national security and endangered lives by revealing sensitive information.
One of the things people are going to be most interested in trying to understand who you are and what you're thinking is there came some point in time when you crossed this line of thinking about being a whistleblower to making the choice to actually become a whistleblower. Walk people through that decision-making process.
When you're in positions of privileged access, like a systems administrator for these sort of intelligence community agencies, you're exposed to a lot more information on a broader scale than the average employee. And because of that, you see things that may be disturbing, but over the course of a normal person's career, you'd only see one or two of these instances. When you see everything, you see them on a more frequent basis. And you recognize that some of these things are actually abuses. And when you talk to people about them, in a place like this where this is the normal state of business, people tend not to take them very seriously and move on from them. But over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up, and you feel compelled to talk about it. And the more you talk about it, the more you're ignored, the more you're told it's not a problem. Until eventually you realize that these things need to be determined by the public, not by somebody who is simply hired by the government.
Talk a little bit about how the American surveillance state actually functions. Does it target the actions of Americans?
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can, by any means possible, that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector, anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
One of the extraordinary parts about this episode is that usually whistleblowers do what they do anonymously and take steps to remain anonymous for as long as they can, which they hope often is forever. You, on the other hand, have decided to do the opposite, which is to declare yourself openly as the person behind these disclosures. Why did you choose to do that?
I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens, but they're typically maligned. It becomes a thing of these people are against the country, they're against the government, but I'm not. I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong. And I'm willing to go on the record to defend the authenticity of them and say, I didn't change these. I didn't modify the story. This is the truth. This is what's happening. You should decide whether we need to be doing this.
In the aftermath of Snowden's actions, significant legal and policy changes were enacted. For example, the USA Freedom Act was passed in 2015, and that ended the bulk collection of phone metadata, and it introduced greater transparency and oversight of surveillance activities. Up until Snowden leaked the documents, top intelligence officials publicly said that the NSA never knowingly collected any such information. Internationally, Snowden's disclosures prompted a reevaluation of surveillance practices and data protection laws, leading to stronger privacy protections in many countries. Snowden's legacy remains deeply controversial. While he has been lauded for his courage and the positive changes his actions have brought about, he has also faced criticism and legal challenges. He's been living in Russia since 2013, where he was granted asylum to avoid extradition to the United States, where he faces charges under the Espionage Act. These examples illustrate that while many conspiracy theories are unfounded, some have a basis in reality. The exposure of these conspiracies has had profound impacts on public trust and policy, highlighting the importance of vigilance and transparency in governance. Anyway, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you for listening, and if you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, or write a review.
There is a signal broadcast every second of every day through our television sets.
Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes.
Science and technology are propelling us forward at accelerating rates.
Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.